Hey guys, how's it going? Paul Harris here. It's Sunday, which means it's another careers video. Today I wanted to break down two distinct events that happened at PwC that sort of defined my experience whilst I was there. This may be an interest to you if you're thinking about joining one of these top 4 professional firms, or if you're thinking about a career in finance, since this is quite transferable to the kind of experiences that you might have. I'll break down why these experiences stuck with me and sort of what I learned from them and how you could potentially avoid them or aim for them when you're looking at your career in finance. So that's what we're going to go over in today's video. Hopefully it's helpful, a bit different I guess to the other kind of videos that I make, more just my own experience, but it might help you guys out there. Let's see. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel. Career videos every Sunday, Excel, Saturday, 2 investment videos a week. Let's get into this video. The first scenario I'm going to explain, I'm going to title Run Before You Can Walk, okay? This is often something that you find when you're in your career, particularly a career that pushes you, is they're often encouraging you to run before you can walk. Now this is great if it's a very soft skill driven task. And what I mean by that is if you're looking to do a presentation or networking, things like that, which is very people skilled, let's say, I think it's great to really advance it by doing something you feel uncomfortable with. And I think that's a great way of, actually developing your skills and moving quickly. When a task is very process driven, like audit is, which is what I was doing, I don't feel like skipping ahead helps. I feel like whenever something's a task that needs to be done in order and it has very specific rules, you can't skip ahead. You have to just go through the process step by step. This applies from looking at the audit file, knowing what you're doing from your testing, things like that. And the scenario I found myself in was I was about 6 months into doing audit. I was on the graduate scheme at PwC, and I was given the task of testing and reviewing all the controls within a section of a large financial bank. So it doesn't sound overly complicated, but that's from hindsight with experience. I was 6 months in, I really didn't even understand controls. At this point in time, I really wasn't given the training and preparation in order to do this task. I was just sort of told, this is what you're doing, go ahead and do it. You might not be in audit, you might not be doing something so specific, but what you'll realize in these financy careers is often if you're just given a task and it's just the outline of what you need to do, it's even difficult to know where to get started. Where do you find the information out? Who do I speak to? All these kind of things. And the first day when I went to the bank on client site to do this task, there wasn't even anyone there. I was completely alone in this situation. Now, the magnitude of my level of discomfort and not knowing what I was doing was very high. But the problem is when you're giving a task, particularly when you're starting out, you're coming out of university, there's an assumption that whenever someone gives you a task to do, that they must only give it to you if you're able to do it. So the result of this was I just tried to persist with carrying on doing something. I didn't really know what I was doing. I read through the file. I really tried my hardest, but I really wasn't making much ground. I didn't even know who to speak to at that company. I think I was given one email address. I didn't know who I was meant to be talking to. It was all just a complete mess. The thing is, I'm quite a persistent person, so I continued trying to do this task of testing the controls, reviewing, documenting all the controls, but really I didn't even know, even if I found the right person, I didn't know what kind of questions to ask them to really get this job done. And the thing is, once you've done a task for say a week, 2 weeks, then managers start piling up more tasks. Then they start adding pressure, asking you why something isn't done. Then once you're 2-3 weeks into a task, you then don't feel like you can ask the basic questions that you should have asked at the beginning or try and get that guidance. Because now we're so far in, you don't feel comfortable letting everyone know you don't know what you've been doing. An analogy I give here to try and explain the situation I was in was, say you were given a book that you had to read and understand, or a textbook, but someone had ripped out the first 2 chapters. And you continued at chapter 3 and you persisted with trying to understand what you were meant to be doing or reading this book and trying to understand it. But you're never really going to have a full amount of information because the foundations of what you're trying to understand isn't there because you don't have the first 2 chapters. But you persist and persist and you get to chapter 12. And now as you're getting more and more time invested in trying to work it out from a bad starting point, you feel more and more reluctant with going out and buying a new book and trying to do it again. And that's sort of the scenario that I found myself in. The problem is with this scenario that I had at PwC is that I also had external management pressure putting on me. And I remember, there's a lot more to this story, and I found myself in situations like I'd go to the manager and say, I don't know what I'm doing. And before I'd even start by asking him a question, he'd go, you're not coming to ask me that question again, are you? Like, that is, in my mind, there was such bad control from the management on that, at PwC on that client. The problem is that's not, not every client you have, not every job you have is going to be like this. It was very specific, but the amount of pressure, it's hard to explain, the amount of pressure I felt, the amount of how I felt like I was a complete idiot for not knowing what I was doing. And, it's hard to really it's hard to really explain how stressful that situation was. It probably was, there's a lot more to it as I explained, but this probably was the most stressed I've been in a finance job at a particular point in time in the whole time that I've worked in finance. It really was a very stressful event. There was so much to it. At the time, I blamed so many people. I blamed my manager. I blamed the in-charges. I felt like I just had no guidance. Every time I went for help, it didn't feel like I was getting it. I didn't know what I was doing when I was there. Then it just built up, and as the longer something takes to build up, the more stress you have. But there were learning things to come from this. And although it was a very stressful time, this is where I get to in explaining what I learned and how you can avoid this situation happening to you, okay? So 3 points here. The first point is no matter how far along you are with getting any task done in your career, always ask questions, okay? Never feel like you can't ask questions. Even better, ask all the questions, no matter how stupid they are, from the start. This is what a lot of people say, and a problem I have with it is that, sometimes you don't even know that those are the questions you should be asking. But the reality is, you should always ask questions. And even the simplest questions are sometimes the questions people don't ask. And the way you know that is by the time you get up to the CFO or you get up to the partner where you're trying to explain what you've done, they ask you the simplest questions. Because they're not afraid to ask you the simplest questions, because they're in a position of authority where you're not going to question their judgment. And then you look like a complete moron when you don't know the answers to the very simple question that you thought about asking but felt that you were too stupid to ask in the first place. So that's the first point. The second point is, if you're ever greeted, like I have been, from asking questions with attitude, which it's amazing how many people give you attitude for just asking the simplest questions. I've been told that I'm wasting people's time. I've been told that you're speaking to the wrong person. Then you go speak to another person. They tell you to go speak to another person who goes tell you to speak to the first person you spoke to, who then when you go back, they tell you that the question you were asking was phrased slightly wrong, and therefore that's why they didn't tell you the answer. Really, they just passed you off. And it's very frustrating when someone does that. I've just been given smarmy looks by people as if to say, I can't believe I'm having to explain this. I've been rushed, told the answer. And when someone tells you the answer in a really rushed way, normally they're telling you something. It doesn't make any sense. If someone tells you an answer and doesn't make any sense, it probably doesn't make any sense. The person trying to explain it probably doesn't even know it well themselves. So never feel like when you're asking questions that you're the idiot. They should be able to explain things in a very simple way. And the whole point of this is that no matter how much attitude you get from people, no one should be in a position at work, no matter how senior they are, no matter how long they've been at the companies they work at. If you're asking for help and they're not giving you help, there's no excuse to that. There's no excuse, no matter how senior someone is, to be a complete dick at work. I just don't think that's the case. And it's amazing how many people are. And just persist with asking people. If people don't want to speak to you, in a situation where someone is giving you attitude, the best way I know how to deal with that is I basically say something like, I'm sorry if you don't want to help. Would it be possible to speak to your manager? Something like that. I've even had attitude from very senior people. And the result of that is I would just go speak to my manager and say, this person's giving me attitude and I don't think that's right, basically. Cut straight to the chase. You always want to get your answer. Don't take any attitude. Don't ever feel like you're stupid. They're just probably being a dick. So the last point I want to make is that all this can be summarized. all this issue that I had when I started could be summarized by improving my communication. Now, I could put it on someone else. I can say that their management was bad. That's the reason they didn't give me enough instruction. But really, I probably had too much pride in thinking I could do something myself, and I probably could have just communicated better. I'm a lot more confident now. You are just speak all the time when you're in a company. No matter who you're speaking to, they are just people at the end of the day. With their own problems going on at work, their own problems going on at home. Everyone's dealing with the stresses of regular life. Everyone's on the same page. And I just try and speak to everybody as if you just forget any sort of seniority. Now, the problem is when you're at PwC or you're at a client-facing role, it's always like, oh, you're a client-facing role. You have to be really, really polite. Yes, you have to speak to people in a professional way. That's true. You can't say everything you'd want to be saying to people. But, I think it's good to break down those barriers and speak to people as if it's just a normal conversation. So continually talking to people, having a constant line of communication that it's, that's, if that's with your managers, with your in-charges, try and be more, natural with them as opposed to being very professional, because that makes it easier to ask questions. And that's the first point, that's the first scenario. Next scenario, I'll summarize as saying, finding work that you actually like. Now, the funny thing is, the first scenario happened almost right at the start of my career at PwC, and the next scenario happened, unfortunately, right at the end. And the whole point with this was that I found myself in a position where I was in charging a job, lots of different juniors that I was in charging. It was, in my mind, it was quite a big job. There was a property management company who was looking to IPO. There was a senior partner on the job. There was another partner, a director, senior manager. Then there was me. Then there was lots of other people working on the role that I had to in charge. Now, this job, because of the situation with them wanting to IPO, meant there was a lot of scrutiny. We needed to get the numbers right. There was a lot of different audit procedures. It was a new client that I moved on to, so I didn't have any history with that role. And the result of that was I found myself in a position where I was working very, very long hours from the start. And you also have jobs carrying on from previous jobs onto this job. Also, it was at a time where a lot of the junior members of the team were moving off and going on to do their exams or moving on to other jobs. It was a right mixture of people that I was getting who didn't have prior knowledge of the job either. So as a result of that, I had to pick up a lot of the slack of where there was work left over. But at the same time, very hard job, lots of pressure, senior partner constantly wanting to get updates. That always feels like a lot of pressure when you're having to communicate to the person at the top of the food chain with all your results. Lots of stuff going on, very long hours, lots of quantity of work. But the thing I found was because I enjoyed the company that I was auditing, in terms of I enjoyed learning about that company, learning about the procedures, learning about the whole IPO process. It was an industry that I was interested in. I liked working with the people who were at that company. I liked working with the people I was working with on that team at PwC, working towards completing the audit. I found that there was a lot of work, but the senior manager on that team, who was my direct report, was very helpful. She was always around to assist. I found that because I was in charge, that whenever I completed the work, that my senior manager recognized that I was sort of the person completing that work, so there was a level of dependability there and recognition. I also found that because it was IPOing and there was a lot of scrutiny on the company, that there was actually a lot more importance about that role. And I think all those factors came into me really not minding doing the extra hours. That's the thing. I don't think people mind working longer hours, but everything has to line up, and it very infrequently does line up like that. It's very infrequently that you work on a job, or a job that you think is important, that you're being productive, that management's supportive, that you have enough time to get work done, or you feel like it's manageable, and even if you're having to work longer hours, that all those efforts, you're getting the recognition you want and you feel like you deserve. You feel like you're getting the job done because you feel like it's the work you're doing, you have a good enough understanding and it's manageable. So, and I think the important thing here is, because I'm trying to frame my experiences to help you guys is it's important for you to try and carve that out right from the very start. You know, I sort of went with the flow way too much at PwC. I started, didn't really know what I was doing there. I mean, felt very lucky that I actually got a job there. Then I didn't really know what clients I was interested in. I didn't read a lot of financial news back then. I didn't know what sort of industry I wanted to work in. I didn't know where my career was going. I sort of just felt lucky that I was there in the first place. I didn't really carve an experience out of where I wanted to be. I didn't really create connections with the managers I wanted to work with. You know, these are so important to do right from the get-go. And unfortunately, I waited too long to do that. And a lot of those experiences were lost on me. Experiences that people found very rewarding. You know, I found the social aspect of PwC very good, but some of the other aspects when it came to work related, I really didn't get enough out of it that I should have. You can't only put that blame on yourself. And the best advice I have for you going into one of these jobs or a career is really set up time to understand what it is that interests you and what drives you. Because if one of the drivers for me is doing work that's meaningful, doing a good job and feeling like I'm being rewarded and there's gratification, because often at times you don't feel like the salary, the hourly salary's there. If you're getting at least appreciation for the work you're doing, that's, I think, incredibly important, at least it is for me. So really carve that out. At the end of the day, if you're not getting this, think about changing teams, changing clients. If you work in an industry, change the role you're doing within the department. You know, there's always opportunities out there. I don't think enough people really try and go for them and really ask for what they want, because people feel that they're going to be turned down and rejection is bad, basically. But unless you do that, you're just going to be unhappy and consistently just stomaching the situation that you're in. Unfortunately, although I did a really good job, I felt on that job, worked very long hours, 11-hour days and excess of that for months at a time. At the end of that experience, the year-end reviews came up and they said I hadn't done enough. Probably because the manager I had on that job didn't have enough sway at the feedback reviews. You know, I was just sort of pushed aside. And the result of that was, I thought, well, forget this. I worked 11-hour days or 12-hour days for a very long time. Result of that was I actually handed in my notice, I think, 2 weeks later. But there we are. There's 2 experiences. Hopefully you've gleaned something from those experiences. Hopefully you don't land yourself in a job where you don't know what you're doing and you just wait too long to try and resolve the issue. And hopefully you can carve yourself out a client base or a career and a team that you actually enjoy working with, because all the people who found it most rewarding at PwC were people who managed to do that. And a lot of that comes down to communication. So there we are. Hopefully you enjoyed that. You want more information like that? Subscribe. Every Sunday, I'll be here. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching.